This morning I am in Houston, Texas, at the South Texas College of Law, talking with Susan Mims Yancey, who retired about a year ago, October of 2014, from position of Law Library Director of the firm of Vincent and Elkins Limited Liability Partnership. Susan, you and I have something in common. We were both at the University of Houston about the same time, although perhaps in slightly different capacities.
Yes, yes.
You were a student in those days.
But yes, I did get my English undergrad there, and at the time a minor in Spanish. And I really had no library science kind of plans at that time, but I went to work in the medical center, Houston's famous medical center, and I worked in a psychiatry clinic where a woman would come and both the PhD doctor and the MD doctor, psychiatry, published quite a bit and had to publish quite a bit. And she would come in and help them with their research. And at the time, you know, would bring books from the library and then do a lot of photocopying and then assemble their things, and then she would disappear. And I was trapped there. And as a young woman, I thought, how liberating that is, that this woman gets to come and go and do all sorts of studious things for the good of the cause. And so it really inspired, it made me start to think of librarianship differently than I'd ever thought about it before.
Now
and,
you were you a librarian at that time?
No.
You had just the one degree?
Right, just the one degree, and I was just 21 years old, and I was just kind of looking at the world. And so it was really medical librarianship that I went for. When I went to the University of Texas, I applied to go to school at the University of Texas, they said, well, you have to come to campus. You have to move to Austin, which was huge for me, self-supporting, single woman. But I could get a couple of courses at Rice Institute here in town.
That's here in town,
yeah,
yes.
here in Houston. So I got some basic cataloging, basic reference, and then packed up and went to Austin for the remainder of my degree. And when I went, it was totally for medical librarianship.
So you were attracted to librarianship, and you were attracted to specialized librarianship.
Absolutely, I did.
And then you ended up in a different specialized librarianship.
Well, you know, even as an undergrad, I didn't take education courses. I didn't want to be a teacher. I don't know why that didn't appeal to me. I'm a mother with children. I love kids. I'm a Girl Scout leader. Blah blah blah. But I never wanted to teach, and that's not a gift that I have. So it really opened my eyes that you wouldn't have to teach, or you wouldn't have to be in a school setting, which I didn't want to do. And so I wanted a corporate setting. I didn't want public libraries. I wanted a Monday through Friday.
So you were really focused from the very get-go.
Oh yeah.
Now, did anyone play a role other than this person that would come and go and do the things for
who would always, well, what happened was, of course, then I'm dating a law student. And so
that's always problematic, I'm sure.
It's created huge issues the rest of my life. But
he's now the husband.
No, he's not. Thank you. No, but at the time he was very important in my life, and we were together for years. And it did open my eyes to the law library at, the Tarleton Law Library, to law librarianship, and hopefully we could communicate better if I learned kind of the lingo of law. So I stumbled into Roy Murskeyville and ended up, as you do for Roy, creating bibliographies that then he would then sell that none of us got.
And he got his name on it.
Yeah, he had his name on it.
Yeah.
I had a ball at the
So you actually worked at the Tarleton Law Library?
As a student, a student worker. As I'm not even sure I was paid. I worked with Adrian.
Well, if you were paid, you weren't paid overly well.
No,
I know that
think it was.
reputation.
Yeah, I'm sure it was work study at some point. Back then at the University of Texas, the main library was still in the tower, and it was locked up. And one of my jobs was to, when people requested a book from closed stacks, then the little elevator, little dumbwaiter would come up, and I'd go get the slip.
Were that way for a while, starting in about the 40s and 50s.
Yeah, so I was doing that. That was my work study program. But then as part of our coursework with Roy, then I did the other. So he was hugely instrumental because he knew I wanted a special library, and he had connections to law firms in Houston. So in March of the year before I graduated even, he said, well, this law firm, Hutchison and Grundy, needs its first librarian. And they are, law firms get to a pivotal point where at 35 or 40 lawyers, where everything's in disarray, and the young associate that's supposed to be doing all the library stuff, is not doing a very good job. And so that back then they would start searching to staff.
Yeah.
So I went down and interviewed in Houston for that job, but I said I don't graduate until August. And both Hutchison and Grundy, their first names were Thad, so you called him Mr. Thad. But both of them said, well, we'll just wait for you to graduate. So they did. So I went to work there in
I have a suspicion your mentor had some hand in this too.
You know what he also did? And Roy's highly controversial, but I loved him to death. He also told them that I was worth a whole lot more than I thought I was, and I didn't know that. And so when I went in, I had a higher salary thanks to Roy Mirsky in my initial, which of course changes everything because that's your base salary, and then that's where you get where you go from. So I've always been in his debt for that little financial
an
trip.
awful lot of our colleagues, see him as sort of, he was crusty and a little scary, but boy, did he look out for his people.
He did.
And
he did. And
time
he
and again,
up.
I've heard stories both on and off camera about that.
And he was there, he would be there. Let me know if you need anything. If you have questions, just...
well, not only did he say that, but he meant it. He wanted to be consulted. I know that.
Oh, yeah.
He liked to have people come to him for advice. He got good advice.
He did. He did.
He was good to me in my early career.
Really?
Although I didn't work for him. I worked here in Houston. But we got to know him. And, would go up to Austin and occasionally. And always stopped in to see Roy and the library. It was in the old building at that time.
Yeah. Well, he's he kind of followed my career because when I left Hutchison and Grundy, I wanted to be a director. I wanted to manage people. I was never very comfortable. I loved being a solo librarian. I kind of ran the ship, but I could see that was only going to last so long, or I would be kind of frustrated. So too early probably in my career, the position opened at Bracewell.
All right.
And although I was happy and doing well at my little law firm, I knew that if I didn't apply for that position, whoever took that position would close that position for years and years and years. So a friend who worked there called and she said, I'm going to Florida. Why don't you come over and interview for this job? And I said, well, I'm totally not experienced enough. But okay. So I went over and interviewed and got that job, which was 4 or 5 times bigger than the responsibilities I'd had before, and loved that job for 10 years. And I married, had 3 children, and so in that very stressful environment with 3 kids, I started feeling too pulled in every direction. And another important woman in my life, or librarian in my life, was Velvet Glass, who was the librarian at Baker Botts.
Yeah,
and
I remember that name.
Do you?
Yeah,
she and we still are great friends. And she was instrumental in building Tenneco's Inc., a Fortune 500 company, the largest employer in Houston. She built their law library, their first law library. And the general counsel, I think, may have come from Baker Botts. I'm not real sure at that time. But anyway, she built the law library.
Baker Botts was one of the first and premier firm librarians.
Oh, yeah.
When the days I was here.
Oh, yeah. Well, that was Velvet. It was all Velvet.
Yeah.
So, and she was very active in founding the Hall, Houston area law librarians. And so we were all working on that back then, too. Anyway, she built this big law library, put herself in that job, which is hysterical. And then when she was the librarian at Tenneco, and when she left, she said, Susan, come over and interview this job. And I was eager to do the corporate, because those doors close at 5 o'clock. In a law firm, the doors never, ever shut.
That's true.
Yeah, it never stopped. I worked all weekends and evenings. And So I went to the largest employer in Houston, a Fortune 500 company.
Mhm.
They had Newport News shipbuilding and a muffler company and a paper company, and all the legal counsel in all those companies would contact the Central Law Library for help. It was a great job.
Mhm.
And then Arthur Anderson folded. The world kind of went crazy, and the corporate librarian, I became the long story short, the corporate and law librarian for Tenneco Inc.
Oh.
Then Tenneco was bought by El Paso Natural Gas Company,
Mhm.
and big changes were happening at Tenneco, and I was suddenly not going to be a librarian for all the subsidiaries, and in a big Fortune 500 company I was going to be a natural gas librarian at this much smaller, it was sort of David and Goliath to me.
Oh.
So I was not happy with that plan. So I left and went to McKinsey, which is a business consulting company, for a totally different job. And I worked in their research and information area. Research, I really love the research part. The managing people comes with the territory, but I would love like electronic services librarian, or the phone ringing and answering a question. That was always my thing. I'm always the people front person, not the back office person. So anyway, I went there and worked in their global research and information sector, which had office, the little team. We had to work in a room less than this size, a regular office room. We'd have like 5 people. We'd all face the windows with these laptops, and these questions would come in, and the answer was all in data. We would run numbers and answer, the volumes of crude oil coming over on whatever ships, or the volumes of gasoline that are being pumped, and we had upstream and downstream and electricity. It was so different, but I'm in Houston, Texas. The energy
capital of the world.
Right. So I was thriving in that, but it was totally different. And what I realized was that I was missing law and law librarianship, where the stories were words and not
So the
data.
days back at Bracewell and Patterson,
Oh,
they're
yeah,
starting
so
to
I'm
come
looking
back.
over, I'm looking over my shoulder. But right at that time, Carl Grubin was at Vincent and Elkins, another good friend of mine. And he had been there forever, but was changing careers and had married and was ready to boogie. So he said, again, when I think about it, it's all these phone calls. Susan, why don't you come over here and interview for my job? I said, well, and I don't have a JD. I'd never stopped to get a JD. I said, Carl, I don't have a JD. He said, come on over. Just see. Come on over. So I got the job. Yeah. And I was ecstatic, but I was a little rusty.
A lot of the other people that worked there had JDs. You probably didn't need
Yeah.
somebody with that.
Yeah.
They needed someone with an MLS.
You know really what that is at that size, where there were, at the time, there were 700 or 800 lawyers. They were all over the world. That constricted quite a bit by the time I retired. They needed management, much more than they needed my research skills. My days then were very numbered with, Lexis or Westlaw. I was totally contract negotiations, and that's what big law firm librarians do. Yeah. So I managed people, I managed the stuff, I downsized out the wazoo space, and we opened offices and had whatever. So it was all about management, and I wasn't doing a whole lot of research.
So you're back on 10-day work.
Oh yeah, and the blackberries. My, those never stop. And then if you have offices in California and in London, then it never stops. It never stops, and you keep people going all the time. Yeah. That was a great place to work. That was I worried about driven personalities. Never a problem. Just the nicest, greatest, most supportive place to work. And
that's so important. And anything you do, any place you work.
Yeah.
Sounds like you lucked out in that sense.
Yeah, I guess. And maybe I look a little at the bright side of things, but
it's called being retired.
maybe. Yeah. During that time, my family was growing, and my daughter ended up being a lawyer. She went to law school. So you do suggest, even within families, you kind of suggest, oh, look, here's an avenue. Have you thought about doing this? And so it's funny, now she's in a general counsel's office in Boston for a company. But anyway, so I have seen the consulting side, and during the time that I was going over to McKinsey, or right before that, I did dabble in, during the .com era, with a research firm called Infoscope Partners. And I was doing that part-time and being the reference and summer associate kind of librarian for another law firm here in town. And so I had manically tried to piece together a law librarianship research kind of practice, and that was exhausting. I admire people who run their own companies. I just learned a lot, but wanted to get out of that. I want someone else to do the taxes and do the timesheets, and so I learned, and the benefits. So I learned that too. It's been a great career, but by the time that I was ready to retire, I was real ready to retire, and I announced in March, and they kind of drug their feet, kind of ignored it.
They're probably a total shock.
Well, I don't
Were you
know.
mad?
They wanted me to
That
do
was
the
what my
budget.
dean asked me. Was I mad about it? And
Yeah.
I said no.
So I ended up staying through October of 2014. And the hire there, my replacement, Michael McHenry, is pretty perfect, and
Oh, that's great.
I think he's enjoying his
It's always
time.
nice to leave your
Yeah.
shop in good hands. I
Yeah,
think,
it was, and the staff is, of course, I had become, I'm still tight with all the staff. The staff had constricted quite a bit, but we were.
I hear that all over.
Yeah.
Including where I used to work.
Yeah.
Yeah, they've had some reductions in force.
It's sad, and it's hard. It's very hard.
Well, the work seems to still be there.
Yeah.
Most of it, at
Yeah.
least the more interesting parts of the work.
Yeah, there's still and then just the dynamic way that you deliver your work product, that was always very interesting to me. It's all, printers were taken away years ago, and but the numbers of lawyers in these big firms is really reduced. I mean, where it was 700 or 800, I think at the end it was more like 450, 500. I mean, it's phenomenal.
And yet, by historical standards, that's a huge firm still.
It's a huge firm still.
I mean, in the era that my late father was a lawyer, he was in a good-sized firm. There were like 25 attorneys, and they were all in the same city, and they all knew each other, and it just changed after that.
Yeah.
For so many of the large firms.
Yeah. I don't miss. I'm glad I retired. I miss the people. I don't miss the stress of it all, because of course, toward the end, it's really difficult to say, no, we can't have that. No, we can't do that. No, we can't gather to have a librarian conference on. We can't bring the other librarians in. We can't be in the same city and meet. That's too expensive.
Yeah.
We can't have that space. We can't. There was just more and that's just the way it was.
Well, it's the way it is really these days, especially with the recession a few years ago. I mean, everything sort of changed, and it hasn't changed back particularly from what I'm told.
Yeah, I think it's leveled off to a base level that, it's not. Well, in Houston, the oil and gas industry is now kind of cut back, so that has a direct effect.
Well, I guess the price of oil is such that they have to be a little more attentive to the bottom line than they used to.
Yeah, it's all over town. So, anyway, it's been great, but now I've retired, and my husband and I both we had a weekend ranch for years, and now we're there full time.
Well, that's one of the questions I like to ask.
Oh.
This is probably an ideal time.
There you go.
And that is, do you have any particular hobbies or
Yeah.
special interests or passions? You've mentioned the ranch.
Oh, yes, the ranch. We have cattle.
Yeah. Now that you're retired and can enjoy all these things.
Oh, yeah, I
Are there any
got
others?
certified as a master gardener.
Uh-huh.
I'm in the Herb Society
Okay.
out there. We publish little articles in the newspapers on plants or summaries of things like ants, articles on upcoming seminars. So I do a little bit of that, and then I stayed in book clubs. I have 2 book clubs.
Okay.
Stayed avid out there. There's my country book club, which is full of retired women from Houston, I'm learning. And then my book club in Houston, which is all law librarians. So we've been together for years and years, since '98, I think, maybe before that.
Wow.
Yeah. So
this has been an interest for some time.
oh yeah. So I still come in once a month, and
About how far out? You're west of town.
yeah,
as I recall.
75 miles. It's just an hour and 15 minutes.
That's not so far.
Like when you used to go to Galveston,
Yes.
Houston.
Yeah.
Well, we just go west instead of to the coast,
Yeah,
and
it's
you'd
about
be at our
that same
place.
distance.
Yeah, it's on the way to Brenham. Do you remember Brenham?
Yes, I do.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah, pretty area. It's
Well,
just south of
I'm
Austin.
now about 50 miles from Seattle, and it's
Oh,
about
yeah.
an hour to an hour and a half to get into town. If
Mhm.
traffic is bad, it can be a bit
Oh,
longer.
yeah. Well, the
Yeah.
traffic.
And we go in occasionally, or I do.
Yeah.
For things.
Yeah, we do too. Less and less, it seems.
Mm-hmm.
But once a month for book club.
Well,
And,
that sounds like a.
And you would know a lot of those law librarians. In fact, one of them she's a lawyer now. She's not a librarian, but she was a Lexus rep. So,
Oh,
and over the years I did a lot I was on the boards, the Westlaw Advisory Board and the Lexus Advisory Boards. Those were interesting things to serve on. Did a lot with Houston area law librarians.
yeah, you were president of that group and have their volunteer of the
Year
year
yes,
award.
all that.
And
Yeah.
a lot of things that are not in the resume.
Yeah, no. And,
You were
and-
involved in founding it too, weren't you?
Yes, that's how old I am.
Yeah. Well,
Yes, with
you live
Velvet.
long enough, you get these.
Do you remember Roberta Schaefer?
Yes, I do.
Well, she was in the Houston area.
Yeah.
She was one of our early kind of presidents, but Roberta was right in there with me.
Mhm.
So she gave me a baby shower for my first child, who's now 32.
Ah.
So Roberta and I have known each other for years and years, and she was a big influence too. And then the Special Libraries Association, I really got involved in, as well as AALL, because of that. Remember, at the time, there was just kind of for law firm librarians, there was kind of more management.
Well, I remember
direction
that
courses.
there were quite a few concerns that ALL was not focusing in the directions that some of the firms needed. And
Right.
SLA developed that. And there were
Right.
quite a number of our colleagues who got very involved,
Yes.
including some academics like Lolly
Really?
Gassaway,
Yeah,
Sally
yeah.
Wyatt.
That was me. I was right in the middle of
Yeah.
all of that. In fact, Connie Pine helped find, who was at Bracewell, helped found the law library, the private law library in special interest.
Legal section.
Legal section,
Yeah.
yes, the legal section. So, yeah, it was a very busy time,
Yeah.
but I had
There's a lot going on.
Uh-huh.
And it was interesting to watch it because, the private firm sector grew pretty much during my tenure in the profession. There weren't a
Yeah.
lot of firm librarians at that point,
Mhm.
and for reasons I'll mention at our luncheon speech today.
Oh, yeah,
that
I
I,
look forward to that. Good.
Firms were small,
Mm-hmm.
practices were focused on basically the local
Mm-hmm.
situation, and the number of books and so on were fairly limited that they needed and had, if they had them at all.
Yeah,
And,
yeah.
They didn't need our expertise to
Yeah,
help them
yeah.
figure out
Figure it
how to use all this world of stuff that they need today.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, but
Well-
that developed.
Yeah, it developed.
Mm-hmm.
And the Q&A, the question for the Law Library Journal, that was with Carl.
Yeah,
So,
well,
it was fun. We did that. You write in a question,
Uh-huh.
and then we would write the answer and get that published. And like, what is an ISBN, and how do they form those? I mean, remember that.
people need to know that. They
yeah,
don't all know
wiring.
it.
So that was fun
Yeah.
doing that, and it kind of
Was
satisfied all
Lorraine
of the reference.
Culpa the editor during
Yes,
that
she
period?
was.
Yeah, she was a wonderful
Mhm.
person. She was with General Motors for a long time.
Yeah. Yeah.
I was a business manager, so I got to work with her and
Huh.
on the journal and the sort of behind the scenes.
That's where I know your name.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, I was
The best.
worried
Yeah.
about getting the bills paid.
You should worry. You should
Well, we had to choose a new printer along the way, and Lorraine and I traveled to several places together to interview potential printers, and yeah, we were successful. And the association was with them for a number of years,
Yeah.
and then later went with ALA through their contacts.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that's where they get it printed now, someplace.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was interesting. So you were all part of that era.
Yes, that era. That era.
That was important. I mean, people needed to ask questions, and it was a nice structured
It was a nice place to
it.
do it. That's right. And you know, you went to an index and you looked up art. We used that journal a lot in our work.
Yeah.
And so that little column of just, you know, made it kind of a little readable section.
And a lot of people that didn't dare ask the question
Yeah.
were most pleased to see the answers
Yeah.
in the questions,
Yeah.
I suspect.
Yeah, the questions were funny. And
Yeah.
back then, you know, we were transitioning from into the world of computers. So we have to remember that a lot of the correspondence wasn't as quick as it was today. We quickly, well, once questions could be answered instantaneously, you know, and communicated instantaneously, I think that the value of that column kind of went away. But now you can Google everything.
Yeah,
But back then
and
you
now
really
you
couldn't.
have online forums. I mean, if you have a question, you just throw it out.
Yeah.
Colleagues will
And that's
respond.
wonderful, really.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's wonderful, really.
I
But
think
that's what
ELL
happened.
has some of that structured now. in
Yes.
some of their blogs and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm sure SLA and all the other
Yeah.
organizations do the same thing.
Yeah, yeah. So it was kind of an early, and at the Houston area, we had a little, what do we call it? It was the little computer group. We would have lunch and bring our brown bags and kind of talk about these computers and search
We're all
engines.
going
and-
through the same thing.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, and kind of try to figure all that out. And we band together to do that. So yeah, it's been it was a wonderful career. Well, remember when we would tour West headquarters and
Yes.
Lexus? I remember going to Lexus headquarters one time. I think it was the Lexus, and in Dayton or wherever it was.
Yeah, that's where it was.
And we were touring, and all of a sudden a light went off in the ceiling and went around like a strobe light, and all the people had to stop, kind of giving their tour, and go back to their machines. And what had happened was there was too much traffic coming in and not enough answering and helping people, and so it was like, you know.
So it was the help station.
It was a help station,
Yeah.
and they all went rushing back until everything calmed down and the numbers got better, and it was just so funny to watch. I thought, we might need that at work. It's like,
Probably
yeah,
do.
really.
Yeah.
Everybody
Well, you know,
take their stations.
when you say the traffic, I was thinking of the other traffic problem that they had in those days. Just too many people online at the same time. 'Cause,
Yeah,
you know, in the academic sector, we got kicked off
That's
at
true.
a certain time. So in the afternoon, we wouldn't be competing
I'd
with
forgotten about
people
that.
in the real world.
yeah,
who
the people who really
were
needed
paying
it.
big bucks for this.
Yes, who started
And slowing the thing down.
late in the
and
morning
you'd
but stayed late at night. Yeah.
print out the thing and you'd see the page open slowly at the 300
Yeah.
baud a minute.
Oh, that's
or
right.
A second or whatever it was. And
Remember those printers with that awful paper?
oh
That
yeah,
silver
the
highlighter?
coated paper.
The coated paper.
Yeah, a lot of photocopiers use the same kind of paper. Somebody called it clay paper.
Yeah, and we had a printer that had its own room.
Mm-hmm.
It had to have its own room.
Yeah, it was probably very noisy if it was a.
I guess it was because it was noisy.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it
And
may
they
have been
would just-
hot too because they used a thermal process for some of those.
Yeah, yeah. And it was down the hall. And one time I came in and someone had accidentally printed a Fortune 500 issue.
Oh,
The whole issue, and it was coming out in the hallway.
sounds like the
Funny.
sort of thing the law students did in the days
Oh,
when
yeah.
they were given free printing by the companies.
Oh, that's right.
I resisted that at my university for a while, mostly because I also, the library got the profits from the photocopy business, and I realized this is going to be the end of that. You and I are really part of the same era, and it was a fascinating time. I always thought, Susan, to be a law librarian and be in our field. I think
I agree.
You and I would share that sentiment.
Oh, yeah.
And I'm sure many of our colleagues do as well.
Yeah.
A little scary now and then with all
Mhm.
the changes, but
Yeah. But a
yeah.
wonderful ride, and
Yeah,
it was
it was.
fascinating. It really
well,
was.
we're sort of nearing the end of today's conversation. Is there anything that we have not discussed that you would like to
Oh, I
bring
can't
up?
imagine. I don't think so. Thank you. It's been great, and I look forward to
Well,
hearing it
I
next
get to
time.
thank you, actually. That's part of my role, because you're doing us a tremendous favor
Well.
by being part of today's conversation. And, adding information to our call it database, but I guess
Mhm.
maybe that's not right with
But
videos.
yes, yeah. Well, it's a wonderful project. It's a
Yeah.
wonderful organization. Did a great
Well,
deal for
anyone
me.
who's watched very many of these will pick up very quickly that I thoroughly enjoy getting to do them.
And Hein, what a great company.
Yeah, they've
Good
been,
combination.
they've
so.
been tremendously supportive of not just this project in the right sense. I mean, they don't own the thing in the sense that this is something they control.
Mhm.
They have delegated that to several of us.
Mhm.
And for good reason. I don't
Yeah.
think they want to make the decisions on who we talk to and who we don't talk to.
Mhm.
And, it's always fraught with
Yeah.
political difficulties for a company that's trying
That's true.
to service needs of everyone,
Mhm.
and charge for it accordingly.
Yeah, yeah. But anyway, it's a good, I think we've covered quite a bit.
Yeah.
It's good.
Well, we've covered nicely. I want to thank you, Susan Yancey, for being part of today's conversation. And in thanking you, I'm doing it not just on my own behalf, although I get to be the one that gets to talk with you, which is the fun part, but also on behalf of our colleagues with whom I'm working to produce these oral histories for the project. And that's Michelle Wu from Georgetown and Frank Hodek from Southern Illinois, who's now retired like I am, and of course Dick Spinelli who's retired as vice president of the Hein Company.
Right.
Thank you
Thank you.
again.
Thank you.